Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today we'll take a look at the Mothers of Rinkeby, last night in Sweden. It's a new Al Jazeera documentary about a group of women improving their neighbourhood while battling against corrosive stereotypes.
I'm Malika Bilal. We'll speak to the producer of the film and discuss whether Sweden's reputation for tolerance and community harmony is under threat. Send us your comments via Twitter and the YouTube live chat.
Sweden is facing a period of political limbo after the far-right Sweden Democrats recorded its best-ever general election result to finish third overall. Their performance is troubling for the country's centre-left and centre-right parliamentary blocs, neither of which won a majority in the national legislature.
The strong showing by the Sweden Democrats is also unsettling news for those who have settled in Sweden after fleeing war and violence. Many immigrants live in Rinkeby, a suburb of the capital Stockholm. The area has long been called a crime-ridden no-go zone by far-right politicians and some media outlets. But to many, including one group of Somali-Swedish women, it is simply home, and they are working around the clock to improve it from within, as shown in the Mothers of Rinkeby last night in Sweden. Have a look.
sanad walba da'da way soo yaraanaysaa ciyaalka inay banaanka soo istaagaan ama soo baxaan.
annaka waxaan qabanaynaa shaqadii dawladda, shaqadii booliiska, shaqadii kommunka uu qaba lahaa.
Den är vi egentligen skillnaden mellan oss och andra mammor och pappor som bor runt omkring Sverige.
waaridka ayaa eedda la saaraa laakiin waaridkiina sisteemkii ayuu eedda saaraa.
For more on the documentary and the social climate in Sweden, we are joined from Stockholm by Fatma Naib. She produced The Mothers of Rinkeby and is a Peabody Award winner.
Also in Stockholm, we have Hadil Mohammed. She is a visual artist whose work focuses on issues of identity and nationhood. Alexandra Pascalidou is a journalist and human rights activist. She immigrated with her family to Sweden as a young girl and settled in Rinkeby. She joins us from Stockholm.
And completing our lineup from the Swedish capital, Rashid Musa. He is a teacher and community activist whose help was key to the production of the Mothers of Rinkeby. Hello, everybody. It's really good to have you here. What a vision of Sweden you present. So, Fatma, this idea, this going into a community, telling their story, allowing them to tell a story, when they've already been labelled a no-go zone. What made you want to do that?
This film is, thanks for having me. This film is part of a series called This is Europe that Al Jazeera English is currently running. And they wanted to do something from Sweden and specifically from Rinkeby. And they told me that it was a little bit difficult to find the filmmakers that could make a film from that because they were told that it's difficult to film in Rinkeby. And then I said, then we probably contacted the wrong journalist because it is possible as long as we have the right team. And Rinkeby is anything but a no-go zone. It's a warm place full of hardworking people and people from different cultures, and it's a place that people that live there call home. And after spending time there, I can see that it is home, and I find myself going back there more and more now because of that. And we managed to capture that in the film. It was important to ensure that Rinkeby gets a fair representation because in the media, the representation, whenever you talk about Rinkeby, and if you just Google, when I was doing my own research, all you see is rioting, burning cars, and not a single positive story or any simple story about the place. So it was important to go in there and actually give the people and the place a fair representation and a chance to show the outside world that what you see in the media isn't necessarily the full truth.
Fatima, I want to back up what you're saying with a comment from the film's director who sent us a video comment. And this is what Ahmed Abdullahi had to say about why he made the film.
What I'm hoping for when people see this film is that they see Rinkeby a place that is, bad things happen there, but good people live there, and not in the way the Western media portray it as just as a ghetto, which it is not, and is far from it. So I hope this film gives a little bit more balance.
So Alexandra, he talks about balance there. Before you dive in on that, I wanted to read this tweet from Afra Nasser. She says, I heard that Rinkeby's locals allowed Fatima Nayev and her team to film there only because the team wasn't from Sweden's public service TV. Rinkeby's locals think SVT is biased against them. Can you please discuss why they feel that way and why the media is disliked by Rinkebyers? I wonder, not specifically looking at one channel in particular, but why is there this feeling of distrust coming from someone? I'd like the answer from someone who's not only from there, but also is a journalist. Can you help us understand for our international audience?
Okay, this distrust has been growing since I was a kid and I grew up in Rinkeby, because media came out there and they interviewed us and they studied us and they filmed us like if we were like, animals in a zoo. So exotic, and they asked us very, very strange questions, I have to say. And then when we saw the result, we were so sad, because they always portrayed us as the others, the strangers, the immigrants, and it was like very, very heartbreaking to grow up in a place, in a small suburb that you really, really loved, and you had all your friends and everybody. And then when you watched TV, you were portrayed like it was like a big and terrible and terrifying ghetto or something. So this distrust is nothing new. I think that people worldwide right now watching this show, in Chicago, in Molenbeek in Belgium, in Paris, in different suburbs around the world that are segregated, that are poor, that are places where migrants and refugees live, I think everybody recognizes what happens when journalists, when media come and portray us, because we are always the others. And one of the main problems is, of course, since back in the days when I was a kid, the lack of diversity in media. There are almost no migrants in media. There are no migrant voices, no minority voices. There are no black people, people of color, and no working class kids working there. So it's also a matter of class, ethnicity, and all these factors. So we grew up and distrusting media. And suddenly, one day I heard, don't hate media, become media. And that was the day when me and some friends of mine decided to start, debating and start doing things. But that was before we had YouTube and before we had the new
Back in the day, Alexandra, we won't ask you how old you are. So, Hadil, there is something about this documentary which really stands out, and it's just the story of these mums who have day jobs, they have things to do, who then in the evening patrol the streets of their neighbourhood. It's remarkable. When you first saw it, what did you make of that?
Well, I had the luxury of seeing it when it premiered in Stockholm, and I had the luxury of watching the director and Fatma talk about it and talk about how the making of the movie made them have to challenge their own prejudice about how certain stories are told. But my first reaction was, of course, recognition. I saw so much of my mom in these moms, and I saw so much of myself in these stories that are never told, and the fact that we are never really truly represented. And I think, latching on to what Alexandra said about the media, the fact that we don't trust the media in that sense, is that our story is never really told in a fair manner. We never really get to dictate the conversation in which we are talked about. And this is a huge part of why it's hard to trust outside media when it comes to something that's so close to your heart. Now, I haven't grown up in Stockholm, so I haven't grown up in Rinkeby, but I grew up about 3 hours away from Stockholm in a really small town, and we heard stories about Rinkeby. We heard stories about no-go zones.
What stories did you hear, Hadil? What were the stories that you heard?
we heard that it was messy and that they had like drug issues and gang violence, and that there were only black people there, and they had taken over.
And we did, which we did. I have to add, which we did. I mean, we had criminality, and criminality is always, a bigger problem among poor people that have no other possibilities or no.
Of course.
But the problem is every time that media came to Rinkeby, they only interviewed criminal guys. They never ever. That's why I really want to congratulate and thank you for this documentary, Fatma and the crew who did it, because I'm so happy in this feminist country, in this paradise of equality, we never ever hear the voices of migrant women and women of color.
Exactly.
All right, so let me do that. Rashid, I'm going to play this little clip. I'd love to hear what you think about this. This is a little clip of the mothers on patrol. And so remember, this is a no-go zone. It is in the evening. I want you to look beyond the mums in their bright orange jackets and see the fight that they break up. Have a look.
Javier, är det lek eller? Wallahi, jag blev rädd. Nej, det var han som låg. Wallah. Är du säker på det? Så här kan man inte. Javier, lek inte så där. 5 år. Du skulle inte varit ute den här tiden, eller hur? Jättebra. Gå hem, han ska inte.
Oh, that's mum power. Your mum going in and breaking you up. How embarrassing is that? So this is the reality of Rinkeby, Rashid. So we've gone from the stereotype and it's a drug zone and it's really scary to the reality of it. You live the next neighborhood along, so you know what it's like. What is the story that's not getting out about this area in Sweden?
Well, there's a lot of stories actually, and the mothers are the backbone of the community, and so that story never gets out. You also the story of a strong civil society in Rinkeby. You have a lot of NGOs that are engaged in social issues, and so there's a lot of story. There are a lot of football clubs in Rinkeby. There are a lot of poetry clubs in Rinkeby, and there are a lot of extra activities that are arranged by the community itself, and is not backed by the government or funded by authorities or getting economic resources from somewhere else. Is a vibrant community that is much alive and kicking.
So in seeing that clip, our community online had thoughts. This is Andy who writes on Twitter, I love that they're doing something instead of waiting for the government. But should they be? This is brought up in this tweet from Vanessa Berhe, who says at one point in the film, one of the supermoms tells us about a joke she makes with the police that she does their job for them. Is this really a joke? How severely has Swedish authorities failed young people of color in Sweden? Fatima, I'll give that to you. It was passed off as a joke, but our community seems to be asking, does the burden fall on these moms?
When you look at the media, the blame is always put on the parents, and they say that they don't do anything as their problem, and look at how their kids are behaving. But I do believe that you have to also look at the background and look at the bigger picture. There's no denying that there's institutional racism, and there is a lack of opportunities for children that are of migrant background. And just now, with the climate of the election during their last debate, when you have one of the leader of the second largest party of the country referring to kids that are born in Sweden, they call them Sweden-born migrant kids. It makes you think, how do these kids feel? When are we ever going to be referred to as Swedes? And when are we ever going to be seen as part of the country, as the community? They're always giving us labels. And no matter what we do, when we work, we take their jobs. And when we don't want to work. So it feels like we never win. And you can just imagine for the children growing up in this country, who are faced with the prejudice and all the other difficulties that come with it, and the police not understanding how to the best approach, because there's been reports. All of this can easily be backed up by facts, and I did write an article about it. There is racial profiling, and the one report that came out last year, it talks about how kids are randomly searched, randomly stopped, and treated badly. So the way, if things are going to change, there has to be a change. And the mothers, they are offering solutions. And the way their approach, it is working. It's not the full solution, because that's not, you have to work with the police, because it's a state. So you have to work with the police. And I do believe in their model. They're offering a solution. You have to change your approach. You have to actually engage with the people from that community. You have to talk to them, not talk about them and talk around them, and talk. You have to talk to them and engage with them. And in this film, you can see it's the case. And can I just add, and I know it's away from the point, that we were able to make this film and for it to come out the way it is because Rashid Musa is trusted by the people in the community. It was very important for us because exactly like Alexandra and Hadil said, people don't trust the media because they've been burned several times before. The misrepresentation in the media have led people to mistrust. And I want to also add in the tweet, it's not like they have the authority to allow us and not allow us, because that also plays into this idea of like the place is policed and by the people and they let us in or not in. No, we were allowed to walk wherever we wanted, but getting access to the people and having that trust, we needed to, it took time for us to gain that trust. It was important to have someone like Rashid Musa who could give us that access and also the story.
Can I also join in on the tweet? Or do you want to do it
Hadil,
first,
you
Alexandra?
go first, and then Alexandra, you go second. Hadil, you go first.
Okay. Well, the joke that they're doing the police that are doing the police job, that's not uncommon for people of color in Sweden. We have been having to create our own spaces and create our own opportunities and create our own safety for years. We've never been included in spaces where our stories are being told in a fair manner. That's never been a thing. So it's not just the fact that they are out there taking responsibility for their community, and that's the part that they're doing instead of the police officers or the authorities. But in every situation, in every context, we always have to create our own way and our own opportunity. We're just not included in a way that is fair.
Alexandra.
Yes, no, and I'm thinking of the gender issue here, that you have, this is really a male problem. I mean, you have the police, they don't have, somehow they are not able to get the trust that they need for so many reasons. Also, a reason is because they also lack diversity in the police force. But then you have the mothers, and I've interviewed so many mothers around the country in so many different no-go zones, in like 20 no-go zones, as they call them.
Alexandra, let me just pick you up. You said no-go zones. Why would you say that when you live in Rinkeby?
No, but listen, listen. No, I use the expression because they use it, so everybody here understands what it is. I don't use.
Don't you think change starts with changing the language?
Yeah, but we have to. No, but exactly, we can't adapt that language. But I'm using that expression right now, so you understand what we're talking about. So when they talk about these no-go zones, we see that the mothers in different places, in different suburbs, around poor suburbs, the most vulnerable suburbs, that's what I call them at least, we see that the mothers are the ones that can help, that can contribute. But the interesting thing here is that all the mothers I've met in Uppsala, in Rosengård, all the mothers at Patrol, they do it for free. So I wonder, maybe it's time for the police, for the government, for the institution to hire these women, these mothers, to give them job, because many of them are unemployed. And why should they, work for free around the country to help the police, what the police cannot do? So I think that's also a gender aspect in that.
You know, Alexandra, the questions you're asking, I think, are what's represented in this tweet from Vanessa, who has praise for both you and Fatima. She says, Fatima's doc and Alexandra's book are groundbreaking, and I think it is very telling of Sweden's power balance and media environment that it took two women with immigrant backgrounds to highlight this vital aspect of the issue. But she also has a question that I'm going to direct to you, Rashid. Vanessa asks, in terms of questions, I'm interested to hear the panelists' suggestions for solutions. We can't depend on volunteers to solve these pressing issues. What are some of the things that the state can do in the coming year or two to decrease violence and crime in these areas? And Rashid, in your answer, of course, keep in mind the elections that just happened.
And well, the government and the authorities are actually responsible for the situation we live in and the conditions that people live in today. And the solution aren't any rocket science. I mean, like the educational system needs to be funded well so that our kids can get a good education, and they should prevent institutional racism in the job market, and they should fix up the apartments that many of these young people live in, and the condition of the apartments are very bad, and also bad for their health. And they should arrange extra activities for young people who are interested in arts and athlete or any kind of activities that they want to. And instead of doing all those things that we are actually seeing, they're cutting on the welfare and, you know, in increasing the tax, and so that the wealthy people can actually pay for their welfare while the poor people aren't being supported in the system. So the solutions are not any kind of rocket science. You could actually do a lot of things, but there need to be a political will, and to make those changes, we need to also organize within those poor areas in Rinkeby, in other places in Sweden, to get together and demand our politicians to actually make some changes. Because I think changes comes from within the people and not from the top.
And Rashid, I have to say, this is not just about Somali mums on patrol. There are so many groups in neighbourhoods, not just in Rinkeby, but others who are actually saying we are going to police ourselves and make sure that our young people and we are safe. Let me leave you with one more clip, and this comes from the documentary, and this is the president of the Mothers Night Patrol. Listen to how she sums up the effort that she has to put in to make sure her neighbourhood is safe. Take a look.
Och när man pratar om Rinkeby och föräldrar som bor här, man pratar om mig. När man pratar om barn och ungdomar i Rinkeby, de pratar om mina barn. Så, vem är mina barn? Det skulle vara bra. Det är det som jag vill folk ska veta. Kom och lära känna mig innan du tar beslut om mig. Kan vi stoppa nu? Är det okej? Det är bra.
Fatma, we know what that means in TV when you just leave it. You just leave that moment because you don't want to cut away from the emotion, because this is why the way that you told the story, the way the director told the story is so very important. Let me show you where you can see this story. The Mothers of Rinkeby, last night in Sweden. You can find it at aljazeera.com, programs, This is Europe, and click on that. Also, it's on YouTube as well, and you can watch the whole documentary. It's 24 minutes long, 25 minutes long. So it's gives you some real insight, and the kind of insight that you don't always get from neighbourhoods in Sweden. Thank you, guests, for joining us. Malika, where do you want to leave us?
I will end with this reflection from Twitter. I just want to say thank you, this person writes, for changing the stereotypical narrative of violence, uneducated and immoral communities of color. We people of color in America deal with the same criminalization and ghettoization as our migrant brothers and sisters. So continue to speak truth to power.
Fatma, Alexandra, Hadil, Rashid, thank you for being here on the stream. We really appreciate your time. Our conversation always continues online. You can go to us on Twitter and join in our conversation there. Our Twitter handle is @AJStream. Malika and I will see you next time. Take care.